Welcome everybody to our Pee Wee Reese chapter monthly SABR Zoom call. Um, Tonight we are with me with Doug Feldmann, who Doug is Doug, I'll try to looking at your bio, I'll try to give you a proper introduction, but you're a pretty busy guy. Besides authoring several baseball books, I know you're a professor at Northern Kentucky. You formerly were a scout for some teams in the majors, the Reds, Padres, Mariners, and are you also still one of the scorers for the Reds?
I am.
Are you still doing that?
Everybody heard me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Uh, yes, I'm in my first year as an official scorer for the Reds. We have two other guys who do it as well. One guy's been doing it 45 years. Ron Roth's been the main scorer for a long time. But yeah, I worked 15 years for MLB.com after I got out of scouting, and then just first year as official scorer.
And I saw you went to school up in IU, but you know you live in the Cincinnati area. But didn't say your bio didn't say where are you originally from?
Chicago area,
Chicago area. Okay.
northwest suburbs of Chicago, and yeah, I was going to get into that. It's kind of a weird baseball mix in my blood. My dad played for the Cubs and the White Sox in the minor leagues, but he's from Southern Illinois, which is all pretty much Cardinals territory.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of it is anyway. And so family trips down that way. I it's kind of metamorphosized from a Cubs fan to a Cardinals fan. So
Right. Well, and a couple of you on here from our Pee Wee's chapter, you might remember we had Doug on, joined us for Savor Day a couple of years ago, and
yes,
I think I speak to everybody. That was you spoke on your one of your last books, the one on Whitey Herzog on building the Cardinals, and I that was that was very entertaining. Just talking about how Whitey just kind of had to take charge and build up that team the way he wanted, even if it meant making a couple of maybe unpopular and tough decisions, but it worked. So, but you're here to talk about your new book about the '87 Cardinals and trying to win one more for the White Rats. So, Doug, you should be co-host. I will let you go ahead and take it away.
all right. Well, yeah, thanks everyone. I don't have a long PowerPoint for you. I don't want to just shoot up PowerPoint slides at you, but I want us to talk back and forth. But but no, it's great to be here, and thank you, Chris, for having me, and great to be back with you guys. I really enjoyed myself when I came down to Louisville a couple years ago, and that was great. So, um, no, it just we all, I think as baseball historians, all of us, we all have a favorite decade, and having been born in 1970, I go with the 70s and more so the 80s as my favorite. I just mentioned a moment ago, kind of the reason why I kind of went the Cardinal route is because of family in Southern Illinois. And I just kind of became enveloped by how the Cardinals just take over that whole area. And also, having grown up at Wrigley Field, in a sense, in a manner of speaking, it was a different brand. I think I mentioned this a couple years ago when I came down and saw you guys. It's a different brand of baseball I saw as a kid in the 80s in St. Louis when I'd make a family visit as opposed to all the games I see at Wrigley Field. Um, I'd never seen AstroTurf before I went to a game at Busch Stadium. I'd never been to a night game before I went to Busch Stadium. Wrigley Field didn't have lights when I was a kid. Um, as opposed to being this neighborhood ballpark where it's tough to find parking. Busch Stadium was this big circular downtown edifice that you cross over the bridge, over the river, and nothing like I'd ever seen before. But once inside the ballpark, it was a different show as well. Not the plodding home run, trying to hit home run Cubs teams of the 70s and 80s, but exciting baseball. And not just stolen bases, guys who would stretch a double into a triple, guys who would do the hit and run well. So it just really captured my imagination as a young baseball fan at that time. So that's where I come from in terms of my Cardinal interest and those years in particular. And as Chris mentioned, I did a book a long time ago on the '85 Cardinals. One not so long ago on the building up to the '82 championship team. And so I thought I better complete the canon with one on the '87 team, Whitey Herzog's last pennant, and what I really feel to be Whitey's um, best managing job. And I'll explain here in a minute. And what I want to do tonight, again, I'm not going to talk at you with a lot of PowerPoint slides, and so I want to have time for a good time for Q&A. in a minute here, but and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of stats either because I know you know what Ozzie Smith did and Willie McGee did and Vince Coleman did, but I would like to talk a little bit about some of the guys behind the scenes, like some of the subs. And I'll tell you, in interviewing guys from the '87 team, um, there are a couple, and I won't name names, who thought that Whitey was a little bit overrated as a manager, and and they were there, they would know, but I don't think so. As an outsider looking in, he seems as astute as anyone. But I do believe, whatever you think of Whitey, that this would have to be his best managerial job, at least with the Cardinals, um, because there's so many parts he had to put in a plan. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen now. Everybody see the book cover
Yep.
there?
Yep.
Come on.
You're
Okay,
good.
good. Okay. Um, so hopefully I can move this along here. So, mentioned 1985. Go to that very quick. Vince Coleman was not expected to make the team in 1985. He didn't make the team in 1985. Willie McGee gets hurt. Vince arrives and steals 110 bases after arriving a couple weeks into the season and stays all year, obviously. Willie McGee wins an MVP, 353 average. That's the highest batting average by a National League switch hitter until I think Chipper Jones in 2008 had hit like 364 or something like that. So, um, and McGee, he had a great World Series in '82, but was still kind of not on the national stage yet in terms of a big time player, but certainly is in '85. And then you might remember the story of John Tudor, how he started the year 1-7 and finished 21-8. He was 20-1 since like the end of May, I believe it was. So a very unexpected rise from worst in April. They were in the basement of the National League East in April. Um, uh, but wound up winning over 100 games. So quite a surprise there. So but then things fall off from first to almost worst in '86. An unbelievable tailspin. And the offense collapsed. In fact, in the first part of the season, the Cardinals' batting got so bad that Whitey started forbidding the scoreboard operator at Busch Stadium to put the batting averages up there. It had gone so bad. Um, uh, Again, injuries to key personnel. Of course, the Mets in '86 are coming to the forefront, so they're kind of taking over the dominance of the division. And oh, I'm sorry, I mean, go back there. Oops. In fact, in June, Whitey even offered to resign to Gussie Busch, which Gussie, of course, summarily dismissed. Whitey said, if it's going to help at all, I'll step aside, and if that would help get things going. But he didn't. And things got better toward the end, but not enough to catch the Mets, of course. Mets 108 games. So, excuse me. Going into 1987, then lots of question marks. Whitey Herzog said going into 1987, there were more questions for that team than any he had ever managed. Because, was Tommy Lasorda was still upset because he thought the Cardinals stole a National League pennant from them in '85 and thought that the '85 Cardinals were a fluke. And Whitey said maybe he's right. We don't know what kind of team we have. Um, Vince Coleman stole 100 bases again in '86, but Whitey wasn't sure what type of player he was going to be long term. He was throwing to the wrong base in the outfield, taking bad at bats. So Whitey wasn't even sure if he was going to be a quality major leaguer going forward. Could Willie McGee return to MVP form? Whitey needed to find another RBI bat besides Jack Clark. So lots of questions going in, and uh, Whitey had a love of solid, if not great, defensive catchers. He had one in Darrell Porter. Darrell Porter wasn't an outstanding defensive catcher, but good and pretty decent offensively for most of his time. And so at the end of spring training, Whitey thinks he finds one in Tony Pena, a man who will fill both those bills. A decent hitter, drives in some runs, but certainly, the preeminent defensive catcher of his time. Mike LaValliere had been slated to be the, have the lion's share of the catching duties for the Cardinals, and Andy Van Slyke was entrenched in the outfield. But this was a move that Whitey thought he could make because a rookie named Jim Lindeman had a great spring in the outfield, and he wanted to insert Lindeman as a rookie in the outfield, and he could make the move for Pena. So uh, he thinks he has the pieces in place to get started once again. Now, hopefully these will play. Anybody know what I mean by the attack of the seat cushions? You can speak up as I see some noddings of heads. Um, on April 18th, Tommy Herr wins a game against the Mets with a grand slam home run, and it's seat cushion night at Busch Stadium. Are you getting the audio from the game there?
Now, I was going to say, if you're playing something, we're not hearing the
Oh,
audio.
you're just seeing the video? Okay.
No,
Cardinals.
it
Go ahead.
still says tech and seat cushions.
Oh, you're not seeing the video. I'm sorry. This happens to me in class too.
No, I don't see any of it. There.
How about now?
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay.
Tommy Herr, one more time. Sorry about that. I know you
Yeah,
couldn't
it
see it.
starts over.
Are you getting the audio?
I do not hear anything.
No. But you can see the video.
Yeah, yeah. As long as we
So
see stuff
anyway,
start flying, I think we'll be good.
yeah, there they go.
Yeah.
So can you still hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, good. This day and age, I should be more adept at using Zoom and screen sharing. So
It must be a
yeah,
Zoom thing. I was say our last Zoom meeting, we had somebody kept presenting audio, and we had a terrible time. I think it's a Zoom thing. So
I'm sorry about that, but so Tommy Herr beats the Mets with a grand slam, extra innings, great moment, has them off and running. But I'll get back to my PowerPoint here. Oop, bear with me. So attack of the seat cushions, but 2 days later, John Tudor gets hurt, the main starting pitcher. I don't know if you remember this situation, but that was Good Friday, the night of Good Friday. Tommy Herr hit his home run. On Easter Sunday, just 2 days later,
Not even schedule a play. Mets catcher Barry Lyons slides into the Cardinal dugout.
Mets catcher Barry Lyons slides in the dugout, hits Tudor in the leg, and breaks his leg, hits him in the kneecap and breaks his leg. So um, it takes the my apologies. No more video clips. So um, takes the wind out of the Cardinal sails for the time being. And Tudor is lost for about 3 months. So Whitey has to dig deep and find a couple of new pitchers for the rotation, which I'll get into in a moment. Now, uh, not too far into the regular season, Tony Pena breaks his thumb. And if you remember the name Steve Lake, he was largely with the Cubs, but the Cardinals picked him up, and Steve Lake filled in very well for Tony Pena, as Pena was out for a good month or more himself. In May, Tommy Herr gets injured, and I'm sure you remember Jose Oquendo. He played everywhere on the field, but while Tommy Herr was out, um, filled in very well at second base. So this is the type of season it became for Herzog and the Cardinals. he needed all 25 guys. And something interesting, I'm going to take you to the next slide, and I'm going to talk about these guys. Whitey Herzog in spring training would go around to every player in the locker room at the end of spring training and tell the 25 guys who made the team would say exactly what he needed from each of them. He would go up to Jose Oquendo and say, "Hey, Jose, you might only get 150 at bats this year, given what we're looking at. And are you all right with that?" And or Steve Lake, you might get 100 at bats, or you might catch 40 games, 35 games. Are you okay with that? And of course, all these guys would say yes. It's better than going back to the minor leagues. But Whitey had a specific role for every 25, each of the 25 men, and this season became more important than ever. In right field, a virtual tag team, really, no one could really claim the position. Again, Whitey had wanted Jim Lindemann in spring training to take control of it after his fantastic spring training. He couldn't. Kurt Ford was solid, again, the man in the middle there, but struggled against left-handed pitching. And then on the right, John Morris. If you remember, John Morris started with the Royals, I believe, then came to the Cardinals and was with the Phillies as well. Morris became more of a pinch hitter for Whitey. I interviewed Morris for the book, and he said, Whitey told me once, Whitey pulled me aside. He said, "John, it's weird. You do more with one at bat than you do with four at bats," meaning that he was better coming off the bench, it seemed, than being a starter. So, but John's point was that, hey, he knew his role by mid-season. He knew the situations he could predict in the second or third inning which situations in the sixth or seventh White'd be using him. It became that entrenched, that role that he had. So every man on the 25-man roster had an important role as the season went along. And the pitchers I mentioned earlier, I was alluding to earlier, Joe Magrane and Greg Matthews. Now, Matthews was in his second year, but Joe Magrane was a rookie. But these two guys really stepped up in the absence of Tudor and took leadership roles in the starting rotation. Interviewed Joe Magrane for the book. He grew up in the Minneapolis area for meant much of his childhood. His father was a professor at the University of Minnesota, and he tells one of my favorite stories in the book. He says he's a little kid at a game at Metropolitan Stadium, and if you remember Bert Blyleven, the old pitcher who pitched for a long time, Bert Blyleven was warming up in front of the Twins dugout. I guess back at that time, that's what they did. They warmed up in front of the dugout. And Joe loved Bert's curveball. Little Joe, little 10-year-old Joe loved Bert's curveball. So Bert's there warming up, and Joe gets his attention. He says, "Hey, Joe, throw another curveball." And Bert stops what he's doing and looks at little 10-year-old Joe and says, "Hey, kid, F off." Except to use the word. Um, but the best part of the story is, uh, to me, Joe goes back to where his dad's sitting in the stands, and his dad goes, "Hey, looks like you and Joe had a little conversation there. What did he say?" And Joe goes, he said he's busy and he can't talk right now." Joe's a great storyteller. A lot of these guys are. I interviewed Greg Matthews. Greg Matthews still lives in St. Louis, along with 8 grandchildren he has there. Can't believe he's grown up that fast. But a lot of these guys, Kurt Ford, a lot of these guys still live around St. Louis because of the great fan support they had. So I'm gonna stop myself here in a bit, maybe add a few more things in, but I want to take your comments, your questions too. They meet the Giants in the National League Championship Series, and if you happen to recall that year, that playoff series, uh, Jeffrey Leonard there bowling into Tony Pena at the plate. Jeffrey Leonard had drawn the ire of the Cardinals and really the whole league with his one flap down routine, it was called. He would run around the bases with like one arm tucked down at his side and just kind of, the advent of probably wouldn't be a big deal today, but the advent of home run trots today. So Leonard had a fantastic series. In fact, he was named the MVP of the series, even though the Giants lost in 7 games. He homered in the first 3 games, but a turning point came when Bob Forsch, veteran Cardinals pitcher Bob Forsch, nearing the end of his career, hit Leonard in a pitch at San Francisco with a pitch at San Francisco in Game 3. And that kind of sent the signal, said, "Hey, enough's enough. We're not taking this anymore." And things kind of turned in the Cardinals' favor from there. Um, I want to mention one more name from the bench here as we get to the World Series, but the Cardinals beat the Giants. Well, hard-fought series, and if you recall, go on to face the Minnesota Twins in the World Series. Now, lots of interesting comparisons here. You know, the Cardinals in '82 had beaten the Brewers in the World Series. It was speed against power there, of course. Yeah, the Brewers had that great power hitting team. And largely here again, Twins had this, check my notes here, I remember just what it was. The Twins weren't expected to win in '87. Twins, I wrote it down, were 150 to 1 odds to win the World Series when the season began. Um, they won only 29 games on the road, but were an MLB best 56 wins at home. So the Metrodome, you see the people waving what are called the Homer hankies down there. You saw that's kind of you see them at all the playoff games now. You see people waving white towels. Kind of began with the Minnesotans there at the Metrodome waving their Homer hankies. But so another clash between speed and power. And interesting fact, you might think of Busch Stadium sitting on the Mississippi River. It does, but the Metrodome was actually closer by like 40 feet to the Mississippi River, where it sat up there in Minneapolis. So I thought that was interesting when I found that out. Um, Interviewed Jim Lindemann, that rookie on the '87 team, and he said, you know, so loud in the Metrodome from first pitch to the last pitch that you could be sitting in a dugout bench and you couldn't hear, you know, you couldn't have a conversation with the person next to you. It was that loud. Um, and Cardinals, they just kind of run out of gas. In fact, one newspaper writer in St. Louis called them the ran out of gas house gang at the end because they just um, Whitey had played all his cards he could, no pun intended. Tom Pagnozzi was a rookie. You remember Tom Pagnozzi, the catcher. He's a rookie that year, only got about 100 at bats, but he had to start at designated hitter um, in either game one or game seven. And Steve Lake had to start game seven as well because Pena was having problems again. So they're kind of running on fumes by the time game seven rolled around. But in closing, I'll say just a great managerial job by Whitey, moving all those pieces around. Ozzie Smith, you see there, jumping over Kent Herbeck. Ozzie has arguably his best season, hits over 300. I think he has 40 doubles. Great on defense as always. Coleman becomes more disciplined at the plate, becomes a true leadoff hitter, doesn't strike out so much. Um, Jose Oquendo, yeah, he plays almost every position on the field, and Whitey didn't want to trade him because he thought Oquendo had the best infield arm in the league, and he wasn't even starting for the Cardinals. So just a great weapon to have. So lots of pieces, a prototypical Herzog team, but I think the way Whitey did it this season was quite special. So anyway, I'm gonna take a breath there. My allergies are catching me with my voice here. So let me stop my screen share for a moment and love to hear from you. Your questions, your comments, your memories of that season. Marshall, yeah.
Hello, Doug. First off, I want to say big fan of your work.
Thank you.
I started Gibson's Last Stand. I'm enjoying it, and Fleeter Than Birds, very special to me because I just published this year a book about the 1985 World Series, and Fleeter Than Birds was one of my key secondary sources. So thank you for
Thank
that.
you. I think I saw that, Marshall. Congratulations.
Thank you. And so one thing I wanted to ask about, I thought it's fine if you didn't mention it, but 87, when I touched on this in a later chapter in my book too, 87, I think was when the rivalry with the Mets got even nastier with the whole pond scum and of course the Terry Pendleton home run. Any
Yes.
cool stories from the players about the incarnation of the Mets rivalry that season?
Well, would you believe that Roger McDowell and I just finished a manuscript that's coming out next year on the Mets of the late '80s, and Terry Pendleton's a kind of a dirty name with him. Um, yeah, in fact, I'm glad you asked, Marshall. Um, uh, Thanks to Roger, I was able to talk with Keith Hernandez, Mookie Wilson, Howard Johnson, Lenny Dykstra, all these guys. They're so to a man. I talked about St. Louis. I mean, it was just hot. I mean, it was a heated battle. And starting back in '84, they said, '84 Cardinals weren't so good. Mets were becoming quite good, and could have easily taken the Cubs in '84. But um, I'll say this, with Keith Hernandez being an ex-Cardinal, he wanted to beat the Cardinals badly when he became a Met. And this is something not Keith told me, but Roger McDowell told me that in the locker room they could sense it, that Keith was especially geared up for those series in St. Louis. And um, so yeah, I mean, you picked a good topic to write about because it's powerful. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, thank
But
you.
yeah, well, Doug, I'll ask a question. And you kind of covered this a little bit, not just why he changed out the kind of some of the role players. Daryl Porter is gone, so he plays with Pena. Okendo comes in. I think one of the other big differences is probably now his name's escaping me, but the one pitcher became kind of the closer. Worrell comes
Not
kind of
Orel,
closer.
sure.
How do you think the '87 team compares to the '85 team overall?
There's my cat. Sorry.
I hear my dogs in the background,
You'll
probably
probably hear
too.
my
Sorry.
dog too. I'm glad we're being informal here. Um, that's a great question, Chris. And the name, before I forget to mention, Tom Lawless, who hit a big home run in the '87 World Series, had 3 or 4 hits all season long. Maybe a prototypical, I hate to use that word again, but Herzog player. Tom Lawless had like over 300 steals in the minor league, so his speed was comparable to the Colemans and the McGees, but he just didn't get to play a whole lot. He was the third catcher, did whatever Herzog needed him to do. And Chris, your question, uh, Ricky Horton, fantastic gentleman. He did the forward for the book, also did the forward for Fleeter Than Birds, Marshall may have seen. Um, he said, that the '87 team is really an afterthought in the minds of a lot of Cardinal fans because '82 they get the World Series, '85 was unexpected, even though they fell to the Royals, it was an unexpected rise. But '87 just kind of lies out there. Ricky says, in terms of a memorable season. The key, I think, to me, Chris, is John Tudor. He doesn't get hurt, and maybe they run away, maybe they don't. But if Tudor doesn't get hurt, then maybe Joe McGrain spends the year in AAA. So I think offensively they're more balanced in '87. In '85, they tended to rely on the first four. Terry Pendleton had a down year in '85 and really took off in '87 and took off even more later in his career with the Braves. So I think more balanced offensively, bullpen a little better and deeper in '87. Um, they have just frontline starters in Tudor, Andujar, and Cox in '85, and Cox is there in '87. But he and Tudor, even after Tudor comes back, they kind of lose their dominance. So I'd make that comparison. Um, I think the '85 team won more games. '85 team broke the stolen base record, but I think I think balance is the word that comes to my mind. They're becoming more balanced offensively by '87. Jack Clark almost plays a full season, almost doesn't get hurt. Dan Dreesen was another name I failed to mention. He just like Cesar Cedeno in '85, Dan Dreesen steps in '87 when Clark gets hurt late and does a solid job. And he wasn't even doing anything when the Cardinals signed him. He got released by the Astros in spring training in '87. In June, he's just sitting around doing nothing, and front office of the Cardinals calls and says, "Hey, would you be interested in a AAA contract, Louisville, at that time?" Sure. And then lo and behold, they need him in September. So, hope I answered your question, Ed. Hope you're muted. Sorry, Chris.
Sorry. Yeah, absolutely did. One thing I know you kind of touched on also was I kind of had my notes was just the Metrodome, how much of a factor that was. And obviously the Cardinals are not used to that. So I was looking at the World Series a little bit this week, and I noticed it was one of those series where the home team wins every game.
Right.
So it definitely worked in Twins' factor. So I was kind of wondering too, the the Metrodome was obviously a key factor, but I was wondering too about maybe the DH, how, I don't know if I think their DHs the Cardinals did fine as DH, but I know just how does that throw off White Herzog's strategy and stuff?
Very good
Um,
question.
yeah.
I don't have the numbers to back it up, but I imagine Whitey bunted
I,
as much or more.
and I can easily, just because I was looking at them last night, but the batting themselves, they played very comparatively to the Twins. But I just know, I'm
Yeah.
just sure in the past, some National League teams thought it was a disadvantage playing DHs because they're just not used to this. It's a different strategy, I guess. But
Yeah, you know what's funny? I was at the Reds ballpark the other night, and I said to somebody sitting next to me, "I go, I can't even remember the pitcher hitting now. It's like a weird
it,
thing from like 100 years ago." Um, I think what it is, Chris, more so, in my opinion, just man for man. Again, when they had the DH Tom Pecnazzi and start Steve Lake at catcher and try Jim Lindemann again in the outfield. It's just the best pieces he could put in at the time. I think more just a man for man matchup than any National League disadvantage. This is my opinion.
yeah. Well, then I was checking on I want to see what kind of happened to the Cardinals afterwards, and they kind of plummeted again in
Mhm.
'88. So, any kind of thoughts on what happened to cause that?
Yeah, it
They did
happened.
they did in '86 a little bit too, but
Guys started leaving en masse, free agency and trades within a year. Terry Pendleton gone. Tommy Herr. Tommy Herr was traded for Tom Brunansky, the Twins right fielder in the offseason.
no,
Um, um,
yeah,
Up and down to John Tudor, Ricky Horton lead. I mean, within like 15 to 18 months, that roster is pretty much decimated. I think there was little chemistry after that. It reminds me of the early 70s Cardinals when Joe Torre would come in, Dick Allen would come in, Vada Pinson would come in, and the Cardinals at that time thought that one superstar would give the jolt. And Pedro Guerrero comes in the late 80s. And Brunansky, guys like that, but just never didn't have the chemistry, same chemistry of
here he gets
those teams.
again.
Yeah. And chemistry,
Um,
that's a word that's thrown out there in sports all the time, and what does it mean? But um, you
it
had that
matters.
electricity at Busch Stadium. You could sense that chemistry if you saw a game there in the late 80s.
Yeah. And it's really, if anybody else has questions, join in or raise
Please,
your hand.
yeah.
But I was asking, I know your book's kind of about Whitey, so kind of the last hurrah for Whitey. I was kind of thinking, he managed into the '90 season, I think, and
Hmm.
which is kind of right around the same time that you see like McGuire and Saquon, a lot of the steroids guys start coming out. So the game's kind of shifting. Do you think at all that maybe Whitey kind of had some trouble maybe adjusting to a new game, or did that factor in at all?
Um, and again, this is just my take. Not so much that, but just I think you could see that Gussie Bush's son, August the 3rd, didn't have much interest in being hands-on baseball uh, down the road. I think it started to go stale for Whitey when Gussie wouldn't pass away. What was it, 91 or 90, somewhere in that time, right, not too long before or after Whitey resigned. And I think Whitey saw the writing on the wall at the brewery with how the new management was going to treat baseball, and we saw what happened. I mean, um, nothing against Augie the third, but whereas Gussie Jr. would stay for a whole game and wave his cowboy hat and come in on the Clydesdales, August the third would stay for a couple innings and go. Just didn't have the interest in baseball that his father had. So
Mm.
I think that took a lot of steam out of it for Whitey. Just my opinion.
And then Marshall had there that I guess he died September of '89. So yeah, right
Oh,
around the
okay.
same
Yeah.
time there.
Yeah.
So,
Good. Thank you, Marshall.
um,
Yeah.
and Ryan was asked about are the 1980s Cardinals underrated because they lost those two series in '85 and '87? Um,
Hmm. Um, Probably would be talked about more, Ryan. Good question. The Royals were another surprise team in '85, but Dick Hauser, how he ran the Royals team was very similar. It looked like a Cardinals team with the Willie Wilsons and the Frank Whites, those players, very similar type team. Um, you know, one game can go either direction. Cardinals got off to a good start in Game 7 of '87 with Danny Cox pitching. Uh, Game went south. Um, the infamous Game 6 with Don Denkinger. Hate to summon that name, but you know, the old saying, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. But you know, I think it could have they could have very easily had three championships, three titles, Ryan, sure. And I guess no one ever remembers second place, right? So that's why. But um, I'll say this though, I hear no regrets from the guys I talked to from the Cardinals of the '80s. Regrets that they couldn't bring more titles home. But not to use the M word again, but the Mets, Roger McDowell told me the same thing. The Mets only won once in '86 and thought they should have won more, but it doesn't diminish the one. They're just sorry they couldn't bring more to New York. Um, and it's hard. I mean, it's in all of sports. I think we all know. I think we see, Super Bowl, whatever it is. It's very hard to win one. It's exceptionally hard to repeat. Um, so the fact that the Cardinals had that sustained success in that system for so long, I think speaks volumes. And this won't surprise you to hear me say, I'd love to see a general manager and organization have the courage to build a team around speed these days. Um, I asked Keith Hernandez about it. I said, what do you think such a team would do today? And Keith said they wouldn't, teams wouldn't know how to defend it. If you had a running game and they thought there has been, an increase in running a little bit with the big bases and so forth. But if you had an organization built around speed where, think about the Cardinals of the '80s. In the '80s, the Oakland A's had Ricky Henderson. The Expos had Tim Raines and Ron LaFleur for a little bit. Every team, almost lots of teams, had one guy you had to worry about. But you go down the Cardinals lineup, there were five, six, maybe seven guys you had to worry about taking a base. And the relative inability of pitchers today to hold runners on, the relative inability of catchers today to throw, the former being more important than the latter, actually, believe it or not. Um, I think he's right. I think it would drive teams wild, and I'd love to see it. But the obsession today with all due respect to SABR, or the analytics people at least, the exit velocities and the trajectories and all that stuff. It's going to be hard. It's difficult for that to
Yeah.
take center stage again.
Well, and I'd always kind of wondered for years just what was up with the '80s and so many stolen base guys out there. But I finally read a good point one time where somebody's talking about the fields, the AstroTurf, where I think once some of those guys realized they could really get a more of a the cleats like grabbing into the turf rather than dirt, it was a world of difference being able to take off. And then as they kind of started advancing some of that turf, I think it took a little bit of that away. But yeah, that was a fun era though, and the Cardinals definitely defined what was kind of going on around that time.
Ozzie Smith, believe it or not, preferred to play on grass.
Well, I'm sure he did because the field, because that bounces they had to deal with it. Yeah, it was a little bit of a learning curve figuring out all that certainly. Um, all right, so
While you're thinking of other questions, please, anyone speak up. Um, all you have to do is go find a video clip on YouTube of Vince Coleman hitting his first home run in '85. It's an inside the park home run, fittingly, against the Braves, and the ball just, I don't know if it's Claudell Washington or who it is in right field, but the ball just ricochets off the right field wall, just rolls for 100 feet back between the right fielder and the center fielder, and Coleman probably could have gone around the bases twice. I mean, that's the that's the prototypical ball. There's that word again, but the regular type of ball that you see bouncing around Busch Stadium. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so you're getting a lot of compliments on your books here. So yeah, before I go any further, I don't want to forget for you to have a few minutes just talk about the offer code you mentioned, and then also just
Yes.
the best way to order your books. So
Sure. Let me pull that up again, and the code is not just good tonight, and if you want to jot it down and use it later, certainly fine. Um, Make sure I go back to the right screen here. So, University of Nebraska Press, can you see this?
Yes.
University of Nebraska Press is the publisher, nebraskapress.unl.edu. And they have the following code available, at least, I mean, it's still good for another few weeks, I'm sure, at least. So 6BAB25, if you can remember that or jot that down. 6BAB25, that'll get you 40% off at checkout. And we can still chat here for a bit, but always happy. You can reach me on my website there, Doug Feldmann Books with 2 N's, dougfeldman with 2 N's.com. And have a chat, have a mailing feature there. I'd love to hear from you. My other books are available there too. And but yeah, 40% off with this code. So happy to take other questions though. I can talk about official scoring to a certain degree. There's certain things I can't divulge, but if you're ever wondering about official scoring, what happens there, happy to share. It's a thankless job, as you might imagine.
Well, yeah, we had one of our members was on the scores for the Louisville Bats too. So yeah,
Oh,
we
great,
kind of
great.
we hit him up sometimes with questions. And
Oh, well, yeah, you've
I don't know
got
if
you
you
well
ever
covered
talked
here.
with I don't know if you ever talked with Stu Thornley up in Minnesota. He
Stu and I know each other. We haven't really conversed
Okay.
one-on-one, but I think we know of each other. Yeah.
I know he's a wealth of information too. Yeah, it's an interesting practice. Just the different situations they come across, and
Yeah.
you
And it's
know,
really not hitter and error as people think it is. It is. That's the end result. That's the end product. But our rule of thumb is we see a play that could have gone either way. You think to yourself, could the average major leaguer at that position have made that play? Should the average major leaguer at that position make that play with ordinary effort? That's our rule of thumb. And you
is
see Ellie De La Cruz go 50 feet for a ball and he bobbles it on a play where
yeah,
a regular shortstop will only make it 25 feet, won't even get to the ball. Well, you have to factor
exactly.
all those things in. So,
Would another player even made it close to that to try to make
yeah,
the play? Yeah, exactly.
right.
Okay.
Lots to factor in, and so it's I like the challenge though. It's a neat um, different way of looking at the game, which I always appreciate.
Well, that'll have to be another future book of yours, man. Get a break in between all these other ones. Is to try some of the scoring situations you've come across. And
Gosh,
just,
I'm
what I
gathered.
do.
I've been at it 2 months. I've got a bunch already. So
So, all right. I don't see more. Doug, we will let you get going, and I certainly appreciate this. Enjoyed it.
no, it's
Everybody go check out the book, and thanks for joining.
good to catch up with you guys. Appreciate the time, Chris, and everyone. And yeah, Marshall.
I was going to say, thank you so much. Great talk. I'm definitely going to check out this book as well.
Oh, my pleasure. And good luck with yours, Marshall. And good luck to everyone there. Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, glad to have you. Appreciate it, everybody. You have a good rest of the night.
Thanks,
night now.
Doug. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Stay in
Thank you
touch.
all.
Thank you.